Hi everyone, David Parsons here with another episode of The Nostalgia Trap. I am currently standing in the middle of my empty Brooklyn apartment as I wait for movers to get here to take all my stuff to California as I leave my life in Brooklyn and start a new one on the West Coast, where many of you know I started my life. So anyway, I've been in New York for about 14 years, and it's a weird feeling to be standing here in this apartment because I've been here for 7 years. And you know, the nostalgia trap for me is getting stuck thinking about all those memories and trying to avoid that trap. Because I have a lot to do on the West Coast. And that includes, you know, building the podcast over there. And I appreciate all the help I'm getting from the patrons that are supporting the show so far. You can go to patreon.com/nostalgiatrap if you want to support the show. Now would be a critical moment because I'm getting established, getting new jobs, getting a house or apartment or some other shelter in California, cars. All those things are going to happen. I'm not sure exactly how they will without steady employment, but those are the things I'm going to be working on. So the podcast is something that I want to continue doing, obviously. So any support that could be thrown my way would be great. And I want to especially continue to work with Peter Sabatino on the AM/FM episodes, which are a lot of fun. And I'm getting a lot of great reactions from those. So I appreciate that. This episode is an interview with Vincent DiGirolamo. He is a professor of history at Baruch College, where I just quit my job after adjuncting there for 12 years. And I wanted to talk to Vince because he's, like me, a Californian who spent a lot of his adult life, or most of his adult life, in New York City. Goes back to the California coast. He's from Monterey. And I hadn't heard a lot about what Monterey is like, even though it's just a few hours up from Ventura, where I grew up. So it was great talking to Vince, and I hope you enjoy this episode and enjoy more Nostalgia Trap episodes and the upcoming AM/FM episodes that we'll be producing from a totally new location. I don't know how much that will matter to you listeners that I'm in a different location, but it certainly matters to me, and it certainly will affect the type of guests and the overall vibe of the show, I think. So thanks a lot. This is my interview with Vincent DiGirolamo. Okay, so I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time for a million different reasons. You've been sitting in the office at the history department of Baruch the entire time I've been here. I got here in 2005.
2003 I came.
Okay. And one of the reasons I want to talk to you is because, well, first of all, you do like labor and immigrant history and that kind of stuff, but also because I think our personal histories coincide a little bit. Like you're originally from California. You went to UC. And then you wound up here in CUNY, which is my story too, but I think you were a few years ahead of me. Where were you born in California?
I was born in Monterey.
In Monterey. Mm-hmm. So that's your hometown.
Yeah. And I went to Berkeley. What UC did you go to?
I went to UC Santa Barbara.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Berkeley is, so let's see. Before we get to Berkeley, what is the scene like in Monterey when you're a kid? I mean, I feel like I haven't spent a whole lot of time there. I've been to the Jackson Cannery Row, right? It's famous for that, and it's famous for an aquarium. But what is Monterey like to you when you think of it?
Monterey was an ideal place to grow up. I mean, I came at it from the angle of Monterey fishing family. My grandfather and uncles and my father came there in the 1930s. To fish sardines. And so it was a really strong Italian American community and Italian community. My grandparents never spoke English, so they had boats. And then my father and uncles, they opened a restaurant. So on the wharf, an Italian seafood restaurant.
Yeah. And
so that was the wharf was my playground. I have 52 first cousins and plenty other second cousins that are my age. So it was a great place to grow up. We lived in Carmel at the beginning, right at the foot of the Carmel Mission where I went to school, and then we moved to Monterey when I was 8th grade. And yeah, what was your relationship to the other poles of California? Because I mean, I'm from Ventura, which is closer to LA, and just has a kind of the pole of LA is very
strong to people in Ventura. They eventually people grow up and want to go to LA, but I feel like Monterey has a kind of associated with San Francisco a little bit more.
Right. No, it's part of that Northern California culture and economy, tourism, and ethnic groups.
What were you doing when you were young? Like, what was going on around you in Monterey? I feel like that was what was going on in the world when you were young, and how did you get? Because I feel like the West Coast, and particularly San Francisco, was a place in the 60s, 70s that exploded with political activity. What was your relationship to all of that?
Well, I guess I was right in the heart of it. I mean, growing up in Monterey, keep in mind that it's a big military town. We have Fort Ord right there. We have the Presidio on the hill. We have the Naval Postgraduate School. So, so some of my aunts married soldiers, and we had servicemen as customers in the restaurant, and of course, older cousins are going into the military. So yeah, we had I guess an early politicizing or experience was JFK's assassination. Very big in terms of the first Catholic.
You must have been young when that happened.
Yeah, so I was 8. I was in grammar school, but he was, as a Catholic president going to Catholic school, he was very big, and then I never even heard the word assassination until that happened, and so that was an eye opener, but also. I don't know. I had a strong sort of sense of history. I remember my mother telling me that her uncle worked at Pearl Harbor. It was his day off when it was blown up and attacked. And as a little kid, I think, God, Pearl Harbor. It just happened. I just heard about it. It must have just happened.
Right.
And so
and at that. I don't know, at that age and at that time, it kind of did just happen. I mean, it was probably a raw memory for a lot of the adults around you.
Well, definitely. I mean, I had my father and uncles. They're all in the Army. I think 4 out of 6 were in the Army or the Navy. My Uncle Toto married my Aunt Lillian, who Japanese American, who spent several years in Heart Mountain in the internment camp. So the presence of the past was quite prominent, and then Monterey also in the 60s was the site of Monterey Pop Festival.
That's right.
Yes. So I didn't go. I mean, I had lived close to the fairgrounds, and we heard it.
Well, you would have been young for that too.
Well, my wife's the same age as me. She went. She her family is Carmel sort of hippie poet, and so she was part of the scene.
So your family was not hippie poet.
Oh no, they were fishermen and restaurant owners. They love the jazz festival. The jazz festival, they come, they spend money, they stay in hotels. It's a wonderful thing. These hippies, they sleep in the parks. They eat their yogurt and bananas. So that's the grumbling I heard about the pop festival.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm wondering like how class conscious or political was your family? It sounds like you come from like a working class Italian family. Are there unions around? Is that something that is a part of your childhood? Hearing about that stuff?
A little bit. My Uncle Tony talked about belonging to the Fishermen's Union and picketing when Nazis invaded Poland, and so he sort of characterized that. Most of my family they were Franklin Roosevelt New Deal Democrats, and so we had my grandmother. She didn't speak English, but she had FDR's picture and she had JFK's picture in the. So in terms of politics, that was the kind of the milieu. Although I had my uncle Andrew Pavia, who was a member of the Socialist Labor Party and an anarchist, and he talked about anarchism, atheism. So he was brought a different perspective.
Yeah, I wondered because you ended up studying and writing a lot about that kind of that immigrant working class experience, and then I know I think I met you in part through some activity with the union, with the PSC CUNY union here.
Right.
So in my head, I associate you as like a union guy, kind of on the left. and I wondered where that came from.
Yeah.
If it was part of your family, or is it something you discovered later?
A little bit of both. I remember being really young and going to the movies, and there was a picket line.
Mm. Yeah. What is that?
What is that? These old guys with signs.
Uh-huh.
And said, how come you're going to the movie? I said, I want to see the movie. Don't you know we're striking? I didn't know what a strike was.
Yeah.
And then the guy says, who's your father? What does your father do?
Mm.
Well, they have the restaurant, and I just went to my movie.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I told my dad, and he says, never cross the picket line. What are you doing crossing the picket line?
Wow.
And then he says, and he asked you your name. He never tell anybody who you are, what your father does. None of his business. So it was both sort of reactions.
Yeah, yeah.
But we all, as a restaurant, we had it was a union restaurant. So the waitresses, everybody was part of the union, and the relatives would join to get the culinary insurance as well.
Even service workers.
Yes. And so they come out of a working class.
Which is something you don't think about with unions today. I mean, we have, like, with service workers, this idea, and this is just like a large-scale idea that when we switch over from a manufacturing economy to a service economy, unions lost big time, and workers were kind of not unionized nearly as much as they were. And there's this idea that service workers never were unionized. But what you're describing here is that there's a history to that.
In the 60s.
Yeah.
And they got in, I think, before I was cognizant, so maybe in the early 60s.
Yeah.
But when I grew up, they were a union house, and and it was a big industry in Monterey, the service industry.
Is surfing a big industry in Monterey too?
Surfing?
Yeah.
Surfing was a counterculture when I grew up.
It was, right?
Yeah. So I started surfing with my brothers, sort of 8th grade and 9th grade, and and these little, we'd go up to Santa Cruz and get an O'Neill wetsuit, or he had made in his garage, and these surfboards. And now Hobie and O'Neill, these are multinational corporations,
right?
But it was a garage type industry starting out, and
kind of like I don't know, what is the relationship between surfers and hippies? Because I feel I've seen a few documentaries over the years of like surfers in California, and then even the ones that went over to Hawaii, and how they kind of had, it was like the early 60s, I think, even the late 50s, and they portray them as having this kind of like dropout attitude, and just kind of surfers as this kind of alternative counterculture thing, but it doesn't ever seem associated quite with the hippies. But it feels like something is going on in California at this moment with all that stuff.
Well, there is a counterculture. I guess, surfers were part of it, not so politically activated, except I guess maybe later in terms of environmental issues.
That's right.
But you were long hair, you had your passion and your music, with the Beach Boys and a certain sound. And it was a nice lifestyle. And also, can think about it too. I don't know with your study of the '60s, but the sort of the Jesus freaks and that kind of movement was also, so not so much in Monterey, but we'd go on surfing trips in Southern California and to Mexico. We would encounter all kinds of people inviting us to their communes and
weirdos. And this is like the mid '60s.
No, this would be early. Summer of '70,
right? Okay, yeah. And the confluence of what you call like the Jesus freaks and surfing, I see that a lot. I see like the Christianity and surfing for some reason have. When I was in high school, all the surfers were also the church guys.
Were they?
Yeah, and I always wondered about that. I think there's like kind of some spirituality in the ocean, because I don't surf. My brothers surf, but I'm too scared to go in the ocean in that way. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you kind of how you ended up at Berkeley. What drew you to go to Berkeley, and what was it like to be there at what it would have been kind of past the prime of the Berkeley explosion in the late '60s, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was there 76 to 78.
Okay, so that's a very different time than we're used to thinking about in terms of the big Berkeley free speech movement. And so the People's Park is a distant memory at that point.
People's Park was, I don't know, was it fenced off at that point? It was a hangout. for the homeless. I don't know. Yes, but it had its day. So I graduated high school '73, traveled for 6 months in Europe, realized how ignorant I was compared to the other people that I met.
What other people?
Well, just
Europeans or other Americans?
No, Europeans.
Yeah,
Europeans. They had languages. They knew art history. We were in Athens when there was a coup, and people say, "Look what your country's doing to us." And it's like, what's my country? How come my country is involved with this? The tanks in the street and the overthrow of the colonels. The overthrow of Papadopoulos, I think that was, and so anyway, I got sort of interested in the world and realized I was behind. I think I went to high school, and sort of really a low point in public education with open campuses and so attendance was optional in some ways. So
it's almost like the dazed and confused era that you went to high school. And I think of like Southern California in the late '60s, early 1970s. Feels like a very kind of permissive and stoned out environment. I don't know if you've seen Dazed and Confused.
I haven't seen Dazed and Confused.
It's like I think it takes place around that time. The kind of like it's almost post '60s. But yeah, you end up going. I feel like a lot of people had that experience too of going to backpack Europe after high school in a way that young people don't as much anymore. It's a lot more expensive.
Yes. No, I never applied to college. I never took the SATs. I didn't really have that as my older brother was in college. He actually went to he went to Santa Barbara, but he went to Berkeley as a trip, to look at the campus, and I tagged along, and I said, this is what a campus ought to look like. So for me, that was
what was it about Berkeley? Because I felt the same way when I went there. It feels like an East Coast campus a little bit. The architectures are rather impressive.
Yes,
Berkeley.
Well, the Phoebe Apperson Hearst competition early on, it gives you those great buildings, the Campanile. It was always in the news when I was growing up. It was the place. And so, even when I was there, it was a sort of a less intense politically, but card tables and on the Sproul Plaza and South Africa divestment was a big issue.
Were you into any of that stuff? I mean, were you? What was your association like to the Vietnam War? How did you look at that stuff when you were young?
Well, the Vietnam War was happening around us. I mean, you're oblivious, and then your friend's father gets killed. Jimmy Arn's father was killed.
Wow.
And then your ballpark, your little league ballpark, is named after a guy that went to your school. I don't know, 5-6 years ahead of you and got killed.
Right.
And so it's coming to the fore. My older cousins are getting drafted. I learned the word AWOL from my cousin Russell. AWOL and bigamous. I said, you get the phone calls. Russell went AWOL. What's AWOL? Absent without leave.
Was it ever something you felt like you were going to get caught up in, or did you feel like you were too young? It seems like you were at an age where it's like people were older than you were going.
No, I have 2 older brothers, 16 months older than me, and they got the lottery numbers, and it always looked like a prospect.
Yeah.
And there was Lee Michaels had a song. What would you do? What would you do? If you were drafted, and you're going to go to Canada. You're going to fight. You're going. What are you going to do? And so it looked like this thing that you didn't need to pay too much attention to yet as you're getting in early high school. So I'm 73. I've graduated high school. 75. The war ends. So so it looked interminable. It looked like it was it could have been a prospect.
Was there a political consciousness attached to any of that for you? Were you like against the war or pro-war, or you just kind of like feeling at that point just that it was something happening far away?
I try not to sort of use my hindsight and think about it, but I was in the period too where it just was not taught in school.
Yeah.
And so I remember, I guess it was about 9th grade. I'm reading The Best and the Brightest. I'm reading David Halberstam. It's a complete self-education about what's going on, and Dien Bien Phu and imperialism and French and the spread of communism. And so I think partly from the reading, very critical of it. Seeing Lyndon Johnson sort of get bogged down, and I will not run, and if elected, I will not serve. I remember seeing that speech, and how could he do that? And so I think we had an anti-war kind of sentiment. I remember my uncles and my father, they arguing every morning. We killed DM. This is terrible. And so they were skeptical too. They weren't marching anti-war people, but they thought that the Kennedy, the Democrats, were getting us in a war,
Interesting.
a foreign war.
Yeah.
And my mother was good too. I mean, she used to, hang maps of Vietnam on the refrigerator. And
wow!
You guys pay attention to this. Pay attention to this. And so she had her influence as well.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think about hanging a map, because it's like it's so different than the environment today of the internet, of just popping something up and looking at it. How much easier it is to find that alternative information. But at the same time, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that does anything.
Yeah.
But what did you study at Berkeley?
I studied journalism.
Were you thinking that's what you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah. No, I started writing for the high school paper, and getting having an audience, a readership. Made it. People would attack you for what you wrote, or
that's fun.
That's fun.
Yeah,
So it was good. I did sports. I did features. I remember I did a graphic feature called Smiling Faces, putting pictures of the teachers there when they, young, crew cut, new hire, and an older sort of sideburns and full beard, current. And so this kind of change over time, sort of a pictorial display. I did journalism, and then I drove a truck. I was a Teamster right after high school as well, and going to night school at MPC, at the Monterey Peninsula College. So after Europe, working, and I wanted to transfer to Berkeley. It was the only place that I applied to, and I applied to their School of Journalism as well. So that's what my older brother, he was a political science major at Santa Barbara, and then he came back. He's working in the restaurant. He's behind the bar, and it's like, I don't want to do that. I want a major that has a real sort of occupation attached to it. And so that helped decide on journalism.
I think that experience, I mean, it's come up on this show a bunch, is the idea of going to college and then going back to whatever job you had before, and it being a kind of big moment of whether you looking at your brother and seeing that happen, or it happening to you. It happened to me, where I was waiting tables after 4 years of UCSB, and I thought, what did I do wrong? Why am I here? Why didn't my major lead me to something beyond what I was doing before 4 years of college?
Yeah, because you took 12 classes and you're not that qualified in anything really.
Right.
And so you're still
true.
at the crossroads.
Yeah.
And so as he was and as I was afterwards, and so you still have to make happen what you want to have happen.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to communicate to even undergrads now. Is that we're sitting here at Baruch College, where there are a bunch of students graduating right now who are, I think, about to figure out the same type of, or come to the same kind of moment where you think, well, where am I after 4 years? It's definitely wasn't automatic career then, and it certainly isn't now.
Yeah. So, they're journalism majors here. I don't know what, some of them get nice internships and what have you. I bought a house when I moved up to Berkeley, because I had been working as a Teamster. I'd been making pretty good money, and so I invested.
You're killing the millennials with these stories that I did a truck driving job, because a working class blue collar job. During college, during UC Berkeley, you're doing this?
Oh no, right
before.
Well, right after high school, and
you bought a house with that.
Yeah, I was making $1,000 a month, in 74,
Yeah.
and living at home.
Yeah.
And so, I saved
a down
money.
payment
So I saved it was $1,000 down payment for an $8,500 house. And so that was my first house, and the one in Berkeley was more, but
that same house is probably worth like a few $100,000 now today.
oh, I know. I
I'm
know.
assuming.
We bought it for $42,000 and sold it for like $142,000, and now it's probably $750,000 right now.
Yeah, my parents' first house, they always tell me in Ventura, was something like $21,000 in like 1970 something, and now it's worth $400,000 or $500,000. It's just absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you bought a house and lived in Berkeley.
So I bring that up because I wasn't free to go to these different internships and relocate. So I was trying to make it in journalism in the Bay Area, and so I did a lot of freelance work. I wrote articles for San Francisco Magazine and the Sunday Examiner Chronicle, but then my bread and butter was working for the Longshoremen's Union, and I was interested in labor. They had a class. David Brody was supposed to offer a class, but he never taught it while I was there. On labor history, because having been a Teamster and really was exploited, really was worked 12-hour days, 10, 12-hour days all the time. I remember the local 888, the Teamster local, which was defunct, which was in receivership and not at all helpful. So I turn to Marx and I read the manifesto, and I'm trying to get I get the language.
Is this just on your own?
This is on my own. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because there's another thing that
no one in a dark alley like said, "Hey, come here. I got a communist manifesto to give to you."
No, but there was a phenomenon in California called the radical bookstores, and so I'm on my route, and I go up to Redwood City near San Francisco and pick up the liquor, and I'm going to San Jose. I'm going through Santa Cruz. And so you have a bit of autonomy as a driver, and so I'm picking up different books. And
we need those radical bookstores back, man. Those, because I stumbled into a few of those places, and I've told these stories many times on this show. But if not for those places, I probably wouldn't have come to a lot of the ideas that I had, that I was exposed to early on. Mainly, ideas from Karl Marx and Noam Chomsky, stuff like that I never would have come across. And finding it in a radical bookstore gave it a kind of like cool, hip thing,
25 cents.
Yeah.
It was affordable. So it's the combination of the people you meet, your family, and the books you read.
Yep.
Teachers, all these things sort of open your eyes, and then you're starting asking questions when you feel exploited or frustrated, and you want a sense of, is it just me? Is it what else is going on?
Not a lot. I was going to say that not a lot of academics, especially as you get like further into academia, have what I call Joe jobs, like working class, blue collar jobs. That I feel like there aren't a lot of people within that are professors that have worked those kind of jobs or had a consciousness about those kind of jobs. Even the ones that are like labor historians. But you seem like you had a connection to that kind of work, that kind of like get your hands dirty kind of work.
Well, I did. I got the job. I was in the warehouse, and then the truck driver got fired, and then I got the job, and then it was like my family was saying, keep that job. That's a good job.
Right. Yeah.
And your brother's back in the restaurant, and so maybe I ended up getting him a job when I quit. But you get a sense of, I'm going to work this hard. I want to do something.
Did you like that kind of work? I feel like why I brought that up is because many academics, and I include myself, I wanted to be in academia so I could get away from those hard type of jobs where I'm lifting shit all day, working very, very hard and completely spent and exhausted, realizing that at 40 years old I'll never be able to do this. And I felt like academia was a way out of that in some ways, but it seems like that you found that work satisfying.
I was good at it, and I was 19 years old, and I would deliver sometimes to the VFW posts, right? Mm-hmm. And these guys there in the afternoon drinking, and I'm here with my hand truck, and they give me attitude, right? What's a kid like you got a job like that for? Yeah, and so
these are all like World War II and Korea vets.
Korean vets, yeah. And so I was encouraged to keep it, but I was exploited. They hired 2 people to replace me when I finally quit, and I ended up quitting when I was able to transfer to Berkeley.
It seems like an important connection with your family and with like your politics a little bit.
And I worked as an 8-year-old,
Yeah.
from the family restaurant. I was
Yeah.
a busboy, and you get strokes for being a good worker. And they, Vince, he could see what needs to be done, and to this day, I'm a harsh critic of
hard worker?
busboys.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that kid's oblivious.
Oh, you gotta work your ass off as a busboy. They're kind of like I waited tables for many years, and the busboys, the bussers, they were like they were the hardest workers and the ones that were the kind of the key position, almost the quarterback position in the restaurant. If the bussers weren't filling the coffees and clearing the tables, you had a complete disaster on your hands. You needed them.
Oh yeah, well that's
I still have hero bussers in my head.
That's my perspective, and but I remember we were having a family reunion, a big family reunion, and my aunt says, you're the journalist in the family, call the Herald, tell them we're having a family reunion, and I said, Aunt Frances, I says, all these families have reunions every summer,
Right.
We're a hard-working family. We've been here a long time. Call the Herald. They'll run a story, And
Hard-working family.
That was part of the identity. She worked in the canneries. And,
I love that.
And so...
before I talked to you, that's the kind of the vision I had in my head with Monterey. It was this kind of fishing town with a real robust working-class population. I think it's still that way.
Well, have you seen the movie, the TV series, the Netflix series?
No.
Oh, I forget what it's called, but it's all about sort of the nouveau riche in in Monterey. Might be
that whole all of Central California. It's like there used to be, I feel like, just one area that was all about kind of like yuppie wine tasting, and now all of California, it's taken over everywhere. Since that movie Sideways came out many years ago, it's like wine tasting became the kind of main culture in all of those regions. So how did you get to the CUNY Graduate Center? How did you come from California to New York City? And the Graduate Center, I'm guessing you got there when it was not at 34th Street and 5th Avenue. It was at 42nd Street?
It was at 42nd Street.
Yeah.
Well, after college, I'm working for the Longshoremen's Union. It's I'm putting out their newspaper. It's a 2-person operation.
Right.
Me and Danny Beagle, and I'm getting my graduate education in labor history, basically, writing features and editorials and speeches for the president. And it's a part-time job. I work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and then Carol Quaynard, the librarian there, she says, Vince, look at this. This is a NEH seminar for trade unionists to go study labor history, and so that was the Herb Gutman seminar. So that was 1980. So I went. I was just married. My wife came. She took part in the whole thing as well, and so that was part of a transition from labor journalism, I wouldn't say yet to labor history, but it really opened my eyes to sort of the kinds of things that I was writing about, whether it was a local union dance or a softball game or a picket line. And so you realize that these people are involved in this bigger
kind of culture of labor.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so Gutman was big on workplace and also on leisure.
Well, can we stop and talk a little bit about Herb Gutman, because he's a name that has come up a few times on this program, including when I was talking to Clarence Taylor, because he was very influential with Clarence when he was studying in graduate school. But how did you first learn about Herb Gutman, and like what did he mean to you?
Well, Carol Schwartz, Carol Quaynard, she became, and she had taken part in his first seminar. She was a librarian at the union and a lifelong activist, and his name came up. Also, the union was very big on people should know their history. So I was writing a lot of historical features. We'd renegotiate the contract between the warehouse contract, which was the Teamsters and the warehousemen, longshoremen, and they used to beat each other up and have these sort of turf wars. And so I would write an article about the background, and Harry Bridges would be coming in and out, and Lou Goldblatt would be coming. And so they were sort of a living sort of receptacles of spouters of information and sources for me, and so I got and my most satisfying articles for the Dispatcher for other newspapers and magazines were sort of long historically oriented articles. And
sounds like you were doing a lot of research for these articles.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to turn it out.
You're in graduate school and you're not in graduate school,
right? I mean, one time this woman came in, she had all these affidavits for the Centralia massacre and all these people who were, so I wrote up this piece on the Centralia massacre. Wow. and I had primary documents, and so I applied, I got in, and it gave me just made me see sort of what I was doing and was part of that, the stories that I was trying to tell. And also, I was big on sort of ethnic immigration and ethnicity, and Herb Gutman had, yes, but the class experience is what unites all these ethnic groups, and so he was enlarging my view about that. And he was a good seminar leader. Steve Breyer was also teaching it as well, and they were good. And they, look at, you underlined all that. Okay, yeah, what do you got there? And so they would keep pressing you. Why did they do that? Why did they keep it a secret? And so it's sort of about how history and memory and how it works, and how people why this idea of people's activism, why they get active at certain times, why they take it for years and years, and boom, then all a certain time, 1912, Lawrence, whatever, they rise up. And so that was an interesting question. And then why don't they tell their grandkids, and why does the media treat history the way it does, and why do politicians forget things and
God, those are all questions I want answered now.
Yeah, so it was learning about, and then Herb Gutman, of course, is famous for uniting labor history, working class, industrial workers with slaves, with unfree labor. And so it's all making sense in a big way in this, and I'm in this position to kind of carry it on and translate it, and I interviewed him, and I did an article for the paper, introducing this sort of working class history to rank and file people in the Union, and then came back and did other stories about tent cities and migrant workers up in Alaska, and then also. Speaking of Vietnam, the refugees were coming to my hometown. Were coming to Monterey.
That's right.
The Vietnamese, and so a lot of grumbling about they get money from the government, and they look at the way they fish, and they mess us up, and they're raping the bay. It was one of the lines, and
always with the raping with refugees. Seriously,
exactly,
always,
exactly.
The most like racist Trump guys that I have on my social media are always bringing that up when they talk about like, the Somali migrants and Syrian refugees are raping everybody, and it's just kind of like this really crude shorthand.
It's a powerful word, and you don't have to actually prove anything.
Right.
And so, but I another thing at Berkeley, I did journalism, but I minored in ethnic studies. So the ethnic studies movement was also hard fought and won, and so there was Asian American studies and Native American studies. I took those classes, and so I knew the history of Monterey. I knew Chinese fishermen had come in and developed fishing from the beginning and were legislated out, and Chinese Exclusion Act and other laws against their drying squid and outlawing the junks and the different. And then we knew the Japanese came in. My co-producer Spencer Nagasaka was a Japanese American family, and they have discriminatory laws. And finally, World War II, they all go to camps, and so that ruins them. So all of a sudden, we're hearing the same sort of accusations against this new Asian group of fishermen, and so I said we got to make a slideshow or something. We got to bring this history to the
because when you understand that history, you understand that basically the state got mobilized to protect one class against another, essentially, right? I mean, when you're talking about like the Japanese internment. I think people that think about that today, Americans that think about it today, think of it as just, a racist act of paranoia and fear. But the Japanese had a lot of capital and farm farmlands in California during this time, as I understand.
Oh, yeah.
And that was all seized and never taken away or never given back.
Oh, right, and these native sons of the Golden State, these farm groups that racist farm groups, they were very explicit. They came to work and they took over, and we don't want them to take over anymore. And so they are mobilizing against it. The Longshoremen's Union was one of the few unions that spoke out against it at the time. Wow. And my Aunt Lillian, her father had an orchard, and they I think lost it all. So we saw history repeating itself. We wanted to make some kind of a documentary, and we were able to get a grant from the NEH, and so again that still grows out of my sort of Gutman labor history, working class history, ethnic history,
social history. I mean, I worked at the American Social History Project with Josh Brown for many years over at the CUNY Graduate Center. And I mean, that's where I was introduced to this kind of like very specific field where I feel like it should be the standard way of doing history is I don't know why I always, when I heard about social history and the idea of, looking for historical knowledge through the kind of the working class and the experiences of ordinary people, that seems like a no-brainer to me. It's weird that's such a specific part of historical work.
Yes, no,
called social history. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think it has become more mainstream, more integrated. Definitely. I mean, you look at Who Built America. That was a novel sort of approach, and you see that other textbooks are, incorporating the story of.
Yeah, I guess it was more groundbreaking when Gutman was doing this stuff.
Yeah. So he had a major influence, and so what did you ask?
I think I wanted to kind of get to, well, first of all, what was it like to come to New York City? What was it, in the early 1980s?
Right.
So you moving to New York City at a very specific moment in the city's history.
Well, no, it was a little later than that, because what happens is I'm practicing history without a license.
Right.
I'm doing these documentaries. I'm writing these feature stories and I'm getting offers to teach at Laney College, and I only got my BA, and so my idea was to go and get a master's,
right?
So I can continue to do this combination of journalism and teaching, supplemented on the side with teaching, and that was going to be my deal. And so I went to UC Santa Cruz. I wanted to move back to home, closer to home as well.
I didn't realize that.
And I got a wonderful sort of the comparative social history program they had, MA program, not knowing anything about grad school. And I also got a Jacob Javits Fellowship from the U.S. Department of Education, which paid for 4 years. So I get my master's degree, and I still have 2 years of funding to take anywhere I want. And so I wanted to go to Rutgers or Carnegie Mellon, some good places. And I talked to Steve Breyer. I says, he says, well, if you're going to schlep your family across the country, why don't you look at, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and you may get a job. Because these guys that I knew, the historians that I knew working at the Longshoremen, doing oral history projects, Harvey Schwartz, I wanted to be like them. They knew things, they knew stuff, and they had projects, and they taught a little bit here and there, and this was exciting, but they were adjuncts. They were cobbling together.
Sounds like
the 70s
I call
were hard.
it the hustle, but it sounds like there's people who've been doing the hustle for a while.
Yeah. That cohort in particular.
Yeah,
and so then I got applied. I went to Princeton. I'm coming there with my own money, and so I did that graduate program. And bounced around. I was at George Mason for a postdoc, and up at Colgate. And so then I came back to Princeton. I taught a little bit, and then 2003 I'm here. So 80 was that
It's a long journey for you in academia. It sounds like you're working and like in many different schools and learning at schools, teaching at schools, doing writing on the side.
I was a late bloomer just coming into academia.
Yeah.
My uncle Gene used to say, Vince, you must be one dumb kid if you haven't learned it by now. Yeah. I said, no, I was out of school for 10 years. I'm just now back in there.
But it sounds like you were also doing a lot of writing and what you call like practicing history without a license stuff.
Right.
Sounds like that's taking a lot of your time.
For a while there, I didn't want to do anything that I didn't write about. So I went to England. If I traveled, if I met somebody, so I would turn it into some kind of a piece, and less so now. But graduate school was interesting. I wanted, what do historians know that I don't know?
Yeah.
How do you work on these big projects?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do that, not thinking I would have an academic career teaching.
No, you didn't. Teaching wasn't something that was number one for you.
No.
Was it? It was right. It seems like writing is what.
Yeah.
Drives you the most.
I wanted to write, and I never, even going to Berkeley, and I never paid attention to how my teachers did what they did.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Pedagogy.
I didn't even know the word pedagogy.
Me neither.
And I never thought I would be on that side of the classroom. But then you come to realize that you have this privilege and that you could share it in this way or that way, and in the classroom was one of the ways. So gradually, I wanted to give it a shot and see if I could teach and use it as a base.
Yeah.
I also worked for an ethnic Indian newspaper, India West, and interviewing different people on Rabindranath Tagore and the Khalistan and the Punjab crisis and the ethnic conflicts in the Tamils and Sri Lanka, and a lot of these people were academics, and they used that as a base.
Yeah.
So their being professors gave them credibility, gave them money and leisure to write, and so I thought, okay, as a base of operations, to be in a college is a good thing.
I feel like a lot of historians here in the Baruch History Department are using this job as kind of like the base for a lot of. I talked to Joanna Fernandez. She's someone who does a lot of stuff outside of academia, mostly related to Mumia and Palestine and activism. But yeah, that base is a good thing. It's a good racket to have, I feel like.
But it also enriches your teaching, enriches your writing.
Well, yeah,
and
it feeds off each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
And somebody said, "Oh, you wear different hats," and they said, "No, it's the same hat.
It's all one thing.
It's all the same hat."
Yeah.
And also discovering Robert Coles later on and his doing documentary work and kind of seeing, okay, that's it. That's why I do documentary, I do writing, articles, poetry. All these people are trying to sort of capture the lived experience and make sense of it, and do it in a way that it has sort of a moral project in terms of what needs to be written, what stories need to be told, what wrongs need to be exposed, past or present, and also kind of an aesthetically, how do you do it in a way that's readable? That is the way, so rather than it helped me sort of see kind of the coherence of a career where you think you're just bobbing from one project to the next.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, when I came in here to your office today, you were thinking about essay questions for a final exam about the Great Depression and New Deal, which is something a course that I guess I taught a few years ago here at Baruch. I guess I wanted to get at something that I found interesting that you might have something to say about, which is like, what's it like to teach labor at Baruch? Because Baruch College, for those that don't know, Baruch College is kind of the business school of City University of New York. So I always find it kind of weird because there's a working class consciousness and there's a working class kind of thing going on here. The students mostly are from like immigrant community, first generation immigrant families, working class families in Brooklyn and the Bronx. But at the same time, they're also very oriented towards the middle class, and they're looking towards maybe working at a finance institution and Goldman Sachs and Wall Street and that kind of stuff. And I find it weird to teach history here. Particularly the history of like the working class and like even heading them towards some light anti-capitalist ideas. How have you navigated that here at Baruch?
Well, I thought it was pretty exciting when I got hired, to teach immigration history to immigrants.
Yeah.
To teach labor history to, at a business school.
Yeah.
And, you're not teaching people who are going to become historians by and large, but they all need it, and in some ways they're hungry for it too, because some of their business classes are quite circumscribed and so I find it pretty rewarding. They have aspirations, as all working class people do. A lot of but they work. They live at home. They have part-time jobs. Some of them have full-time jobs, and so they're hip to these issues.
Yeah, that's what I feel like is like their orientation of what their future will be like and where they want to go is very different than their lived experience. And so when you're talking about like the lived experience of the working class, I think it does connect with their lives.
Yeah. Well, what's the motto of Baruch is, what is it? The American dream still lives, or something like that.
Yeah, right.
And the American dream to the students is, financial success.
Right.
Is that?
Yeah.
But I again from government said, well, what is the American dream? It is this independence. It's being independent from an employer, an overseer.
The money is a means
landlord.
to independence.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
And so you look for ways to kind of have them sort of think about what the American dream is, think about what aspirations are, think about individualism versus sort of collective efforts. The New Deal in the 1930s is a important decade, especially now. Everyone's talking about Trump's 100 days, and so FDR's 100 days. The welfare state is part of the problem or part of the solution. So all of these issues we are grappling with every week.
Yeah, the FDR's first 100 days is like the most intense period of legislative action in history, isn't it? I mean, they did a lot more than Trump's first 100 days. I feel like. Oh yeah. But why? I mean, we can sit here and talk about the New Deal forever, but I think you had at some point during, maybe it was a couple of years ago, I saw you wearing a button that said something like, I'd prefer FDR or something like that. Bring back FDR.
Yeah.
And I knew that, I know that you kind of have I like your like New Deal orientation, because for me, it's like as far left as I get, and as far like and thinking about radicalism and anarchism, I just want the New Deal. Like I would like that to come back. I like that spirit. And it seems like, when you compare FDR to Trump, FDR came in with like a coalition. Like he actually played politics in a way that Trump doesn't seem like he's good at all. Oh, right?
Well, how could he be? He has no experience
as
an executive of companies. So no, FDR was a wily politician, and he had his constituency, and it limited in some ways, not wanting to annoy the South and the Southern senators. I forget. I lost my train of thought, but.
Those executive orders that Trump does, it seems like that doesn't really display power to just show that you have in other words, it doesn't show anybody that you're like FDR was doing. Not that FDR didn't do executive orders, but you're not convincing anybody of the weight of your ideas. You don't, if you're doing executive orders, you're just saying, look, this is what we're doing now, and that's that. Right. And you haven't convinced Congress or the American people. No. That's why I feel, I don't know, as much as I'm terrified of him as an authoritarian, at the same time I feel like he's a very weak president. Or when you compare him to someone like FDR, it feels like he's not going to be able to get his program done.
Yeah, well, everyone looks weak compared to FDR.
That's true.
But you're right. He does have both houses of Congress. Trump does, and that's not helping him. So yeah, building consensus, horse trading, and FDR I think was non-ideological.
And
Trump promised to be non-ideological, but that's been exposed as false. So it's been an interesting time to teach the 1930s.
Right. Yeah. Do you find that students are like knee-jerk anti-union, or they don't have any idea what unions are? Because we live in an age in which unions it's something like 9% of American workers are in a union. Do you feel like there's a lot of work to be done with students to teach them what a union is, why it's important, what it does, that kind of thing?
I think so. I think on the other hand, I had one student a couple of years ago. Her father was killed on a picket line.
Wow.
He was run over by a truck, and so there is a diversity.
Some people get it.
Some people get it.
Yeah.
And upstate New York, young woman, and I sometimes bring in the sort of I show up for class just on time because I've been at this union meeting that we've had, and so sometimes I share some of that perspective with them as well. So yeah, it could be a foreign sort of institution to them, right. but it's. You expose them to the speeches of John L. Lewis. You look at these demonstrations, and FDR says, the first thing I'd do if I was a working man was join a union. And so you see how this sort of institution that may be reviled in their times, was at one time helped transform the country, democratize the workplace.
Yeah.
And so whether that's the first time you're exposed to that idea or not, they hopefully percolate, resonate, and become part of their frame of reference when they're in the workplace, when they're trying to understand why they are.
Maybe when they finally have the experience of being exploited, they might recall that class they took and have a little flash of maybe I should pick up that Communist Manifesto, or at least
alienated labor.
Well, I try to introduce ideas about, and I don't use these words, but like the labor theory of value. I kind of try to introduce this concept of, why should the managers keep all the profit when the workers are doing all the labor of the company? I try to introduce those questions and get them to think about it, and get them to either defend their point of view or maybe give up in the face of my point of view. But either way, I think it's important to get that stuff out there, because they're not going to get it anywhere else.
Absolutely.
There's nowhere where I can think that you would explain the labor theory of value in our society. It's not on a Netflix show.
In conversation with coworkers, I don't know.
Right. Yeah, that's where that stuff comes out.
I mean, I had my radical great uncle, and so he would, open these ideas up, and then, but it's on a need to know basis. And so when you're feeling exploited, when you can't understand what's going on, then you bring up conversations with other people, and you look for other ideas, and you can be alienated from your work in Wall Street as well as in a factory.
And I think that what's unfortunate about so many students at Baruch are the ones that are just have a Wall Street kind of attitude already before they've even gotten there. I don't know where they pick it up, but I mean, I guess it's everywhere.
Well, I have students who I'd like to major in history, but my parents won't let me.
I hear that a lot.
And so they're if you're immigrant and first generation, you don't necessarily have, I couldn't tell my daughter what to major in at all. She would never listen to me.
Yeah.
And their parents will say, well, where's the history factory? Where's the history, and so what are you going to do with it? And so they and I had that practical sort of occupational orientation as well. So I kind of understand it.
There's a feeling that a business major is going to produce a good job at the end of it. Where I feel like the numbers show that people with humanities degrees, people with history degrees do well. Do well in that job market, in part because people with history degrees know how to read and write, and that's a skill that a lot of people graduate from college not knowing how to do.
Right. And I learned. I mean, I got going to school in journalism, which was a liberal arts education with a real strong emphasis in writing. You get close reading of your stuff, and so that was the skill I graduated with. Yeah. What have we left out?
Yeah, what have we left out? You work for PSC CUNY, right? You've involved in that union. That must be different than working with longshoremen.
Right. Well, I wasn't a longshoreman. I wasn't, physically doing that work. I was putting out the newspaper, and so I'd been a member since I joined here, but I hadn't been all that active. I'd go to some meetings.
Right.
But then, a couple of years ago, we're working 5-6 years with no contract.
That's right.
And so I'm thinking, what, are my PSC leadership, are they inept? What's going on here? So I went and I sat in on the negotiations, and then I saw what a stonewall. I mean, this was 5 years. They still haven't responded.
And with stonewall, do you mean like the CUNY Board of Trustees?
It was the team of negotiators.
Yeah, right.
Representing, I guess, the trustees, and representing the CUNY Central. And
I've only been in those rooms a couple times.
Yeah. No, they said, well, we need this. Well, you can need and want anything you want, but that doesn't mean you're going to get it. That doesn't mean we have to even entertain your demand. And so there was no offer back from the demands in all these years. And so I'm thinking, they had an action and people were going to get arrested. And I said, well, I'll get arrested. I was living in Manhattan at the time, and so part of this demonstration, and we got the first offer on the table the day we all got arrested. So it was an effort to force their hand.
And I mean, this because there was this a strike authorization vote. This was like last year, right?
Yes.
And that was, as I understood it, that was like the final push where they finally came to the table. That
was another, may have been grandstanding, it may have been a bluff, but maybe not. We could have struck, and so but we needed to go to those lengths to even just get a response from them, and so. The chapter at Baruch was sort of defunct. It's hard to have a PSC, a union chapter in a business school.
Yeah.
Lots of people are just ideologically opposed, and so I was just informed I was elected the chapter chair. So this was again the beginning of my real education about labor and labor history. And how do you organize? How do you get people to sort of recognize what their interests are and
Well, I mean, it's kind of I feel like it's a classic situation in the CUNY system, and not just the CUNY system, but in higher education in general. Is this kind of like the labor, the class of labor is split between the full timers and adjuncts who don't see themselves as part of the same constituency. Full timers and adjuncts look at each other from across a vast chasm, I feel like, in a lot of ways. And it's something that our students know nothing about, adjuncts and full timers and what's the difference. No. Do you feel like students should be pulled into that conversation? I mean, would you agree? I mean, that is a crisis, like the adjunct versus full timer thing, or just the idea that.
Well, I don't know
austerity
if it's a crisis, but it's definitely the profession is changing, and now the adjuncts who were a fraction of the department, people coming in, fill in, teach different things, and supplement the offerings. Now they're 60%. They're more than half in these departments.
In some schools, I think they're like 75.
Even 75%. Yeah. So tenured track or tenured faculty may see them as sort of helping to erode that system.
Right.
And so I encounter that here, and we have to try to look at what common ground we have, and in some ways to make the adjuncts job conditions better, job security better, is one way to try to sort of melt the difference and eliminate their.
But it's not in the interest of the university to melt that difference.
No, it's not. But if they have to pay $7,000 a class, which is a demand, then that's why not have them full time? And some of them are full time, but why not contributing to service and the scholarship and so I think that one solution is to improve the job of the adjuncts. And I also looking at other industries, whether auto or steel, they have these the same kinds of things where people at different ranks have different interests, and so it's not just
how do you overcome that?
Well, that's the challenge, but I think it's possible, and that divide and conquer is part of what's used against us.
Right. I mean, I've been adjunct for many years, and I know that if I got a full-time job, I would just be thankful that I got a full-time job, and I feel on the other side of that wall and thankful for it. And I feel like a lot of, in other words, people are going to be much more, I don't know, likely to be active in the union if they're threatened in some way. But it's a really tricky thing, because the difference between the money you make and the security you have as an adjunct and as a full-time tenure track professor is vast. I mean, it's just what you're talking about, having having the full-time academic job as a base so you can do other stuff.
Right.
If you're an adjunct, you don't have that. You just literally try to find, I've been an adjunct, and I just try to find jobs at other schools and try to get as many classes as I can per semester, and that however many classes I get, that's how much money I'm going to have that semester, and that's that. And it feels like there is no solution to that beyond paying adjuncts a good rate and having health insurance and some form of job security. I feel like the new contract has a little bit of that with adjuncts.
Yeah, they get health insurance.
Yeah, and you get something like a 3-year certificate or something like that.
They haven't even been members of the union for that long.
Right.
And so union representation, they do health benefits. Now they're, to get a 3-year contract, so some semblance of job security. And so these are efforts to kind of serve that majority constituency.
Kind of amazing to see a university system run with the same principles as like a Walmart in a lot of ways. And I mean that by like the institutional powers having a very antagonistic attitude towards even faculty in terms of what they're giving them.
Yes, well, we just had a labor management meeting, and we're meeting.
Cuomo is not friendly to this school, right?
Well, higher education is reviled on the public airwaves.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Why isn't Cuomo? I mean, I hear this all the time that Cuomo is an enemy of CUNY. Why is it? Is it he does not see it as he doesn't see CUNY as politically? He doesn't see the city as politically important because he screwed us over with the subways now too.
I mean, a part of it is a rivalry with the city, and let the city pay for it. It's
right.
A CUNY system. Although the state has paid for it from the get go, so it's kind of a power play to help him balance the budget. And I guess it doesn't get him much sort of politically to be generous to CUNY and to support this institution, and so he has to be pressured to do so. But it would seem that now he has this Excelsior scholarship, and he's trying to make his name in this field. But we need to pressure him, and we need perhaps antagonize him. Some of my members don't say, "Why we antagonize him? He's a vindictive SOB. We can't.
Yeah.
As a union, we can't not endorse him and then expect him to come through for us."
Oh God, that's all politics.
But I knew in coming to work for CUNY that my fortunes would rise and fall with the state of New York.
Yeah.
And so I signed on to that, and I will wade through the low times and sort of agitate to try to get
Well, we can. What else do we have, really?
And the whole point is that it also sort of improves the quality of education for our students.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate you sitting down with me. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank my guest, Vincent DiGirolamo. It's always great to talk to Vince. He's someone whose work on labor history, and particularly a book he's been working on about newsboys and the history of newsboys, is something that I think everyone that listens to this show would enjoy. So check him out online, and thanks a lot for listening to the show. Please support the show if you want to hear more episodes. It's important that I continue to have a little bit of money coming my way because I'm entering the uncharted territories of the West Coast. So patreon.com/nostalgiatrap is how you can throw me a few bucks. I appreciate it. We got more AM, FM, and other Nostalgia Trap episodes on the way. Thanks a lot. See you next time.